Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for Screw the Stock Market. Uh, and we're talking today with our guest, Jeff Evenson. A really good interview. What'd you think of these?
This is a really good one. I mean, the man is pure knowledge. He'll lay out the blueprint for you in from A to B or A to Z in terms of how to buy a business, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the show is about acquisition entrepreneurship and the distinction between having a startup and buying an existing business that's already up and running and already generating cash. Jeff talks about um, what is it? First of all, much lower risk with buying a business compared to starting a business, and a bunch of other benefits. He really gives some really practical examples and advice, and I think you're going to find it really valuable.
Most
Uh,
importantly, how to do it all without having to spend any of your own money.
yeah, that was really exciting.
Yeah.
It's doable. I mean, he said he's bought I don't know, he mentioned at least 4 or 5 businesses that he's bought. He said he's never pulled any money out of his pocket to buy any of these businesses.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so we hope you enjoy the show. It's a good one. And here we go. All right. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. Again,
Yeah,
I'm
happy to be
Alex
here.
Escobar. I'm the host of the show. Aziz Yusuf, thank you for joining too.
Hey,
Co-host.
happy to be here. As always, every day.
And so our guest today is Jeff Evenson, not Evanson.
That's correct.
I made that mistake for a while. And
Correct.
so Jeff, we always just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, how you got to where you're at, and then we'll dive into more of the specifics on acquisition entrepreneurship afterwards. Please.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. As somebody who worked in the stock market for a while, I find it ironic that I would be on a podcast that that says screw the stock market. So, give you the 2 minute overview of Jeff's background. I grew up in the St. Louis area in middle of the United States, and I went away to college at West Point up in New York, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into at all. It just kind of landed there, and people started yelling at me, and I started following, answering questions and doing what they asked me to do. So ended up graduating there in 1990 into peace was breaking out all during the time that I was at West Point. And then some guy that I'd never heard of invaded a country I'd never heard of back in 1990, and I entered the big army as a lieutenant into the middle of the Persian Gulf conflict. And I spent 3 years active duty in the army. My time in the army wasn't terribly exciting. My military career kind of peaked my senior year at West Point, so I didn't really have anything remarkable that happened to me during the army time. I got out, went to grad school, earned my MBA, specifically focused in finance. I spent, I guess, the better part of 10 years initially trading stocks, on the institutional side. That I was part of a company that was sort of a Bloomberg competitor that was doing financial market data stuff. And then I moved to the buy side as a fund manager for a boutique investment firm, equity manager, and then ended up kind of the end of that road was the highest point of the food chain, which was working for a big multinational company, big brewer, Anheuser-Busch, and in their treasury managing pension funds. Being in a beer company, I decided it'd probably be smart to understand how to sell beer. So I moved into the beer sales side of that business, and then ultimately ended up in an M&A segment of their business where we were approving deals where beer distributors were buying and selling territories from each other and stuff like that. So that really exposed me for the first time. I'd done all the theoretical stuff, looking at stocks and, MBA and all that other stuff, learning about financial statements. But really, it wasn't until I was in this small business M&A world that I started to understand that, this stuff, actually gets used. And there's a way to use financial statements in day-to-day operations of a business. At that same time, my ex-wife, she's my ex-wife now, at the time we were married, was working for, of all things, a hair salon. Aziz and I probably don't use those services as nearly as much as Alejandro does. But so she was working for a hair salon.
Very high maintenance, actually.
Right.
For the people just listening, they're bald.
I prefer aerodynamic.
That's right. That's right. God only made a few perfect heads, on the rest he put hair.
Yes.
And so we so she was working for a rather large hair salon. She was operating the business, and the owner didn't want to be there anymore, and so we offered to buy the business. And I'll get into the details of that in a second, because there's, it bears some understanding of, how do you go from working day to day for the man to acquiring a business when, did you have a big bucket of money and all those kind of things? We can talk about that. So bought that business, opened a second location of that business 3 years later. So that was 2008 was when we purchased it. 2011, we opened a second location. 2015, we bought a manufacturer that was part of our supply chain. In the end, we had about, and that manufacturer is very small, maybe $500,000 in revenue. So in the end, we probably had about $7.5 million in revenue total, with about 115 employees. And I exited those businesses through a divorce in 2018. And she continues to operate those businesses today. In the throes of that divorce, I was approached by a West Point friend of mine who knew a business owner that was looking to sell a precision machine shop, which I had absolutely no experience in. Neither one of us did. And so we actually ended up acquiring that business in May of 19. And in the interim, while when I owned the salons and the manufacturing company, I also started up a Jamba Juice franchisee in St. Louis. I did that for about a year and a half. I've got a lot of year and a half things on my resume. I've kind of decided that I'm really good at the sprint, and I'm not much of a middle distance runner or a marathoner. So I'm Usain Bolt when it comes to the sprint. So I'm world class on that stuff, but I'm not really great at hanging around and tinkering after the first 18 to 24 months. So that kind of brings you to today. A year ago, I was bought out of my business. I've been a coach for an organization called the Lions Pride. And we help people accelerate small businesses and optimize their lives at the same time. Because if you're winning at work and you're not winning at home, you're not winning. So that's kind of an opportunity for me to help other people.
Of the Lions Pride.
Alex is a proud member, and I think it's been a great opportunity to work with people like Alex to help them, optimize.
Yeah, definitely. That message really resonated with me. I mean, even I think it's just such a common thing to see, right? Like putting all your drive and energy into a business limits what you can put in at home, and relationships suffer. And when I heard that was just something that really resonated. I don't want to make $1 million and end up losing my spouse. So
yeah, well, and I can tell you that the founder of that company, Bill Watkins, had a business that he started in his basement, running up $250,000 in credit card debt, stressing payrolls and all the other stuff that you do. Built that business and made an 8-figure exit, and then went through a divorce. So that part resonated with me as well, because I was going through that when I met him. And so I think that there's a lot to having that balance, and it's not necessarily balance, but it's pressing on the gas when you need to press on the gas, and letting it off when you need to let off, that sort of thing. So
absolutely.
Now, can you walk us through can you walk us through one of those deals that,
Yeah.
and also kind of give us a way of how to do it without kind of like, because, you painted like a terrifying picture about like going all in and then your life around you gets destroyed, but you make out successly at the end. But just a way about doing it where it's a little bit more balanced.
Yeah, I know, Aziz. I think that's a great question. I'll give you the example of the hair salon business, and as you know, that acquisition took place 10 years before we went through a divorce, and there were systemic problems in the relationship that weren't related to how we were running the business that caused that. But like I said, I was working for Anheuser-Busch at the time. My ex-wife was working for the company, so she had a lot of inside understanding of how the business operated every day. Just to set the table, it was a hair salon doing about $4 million in business. It's a big hair salon, had about 65 employees, 70 employees, something like that. So not your grandmother's hair salon type place. And the business was probably throwing off 10% margins or something like that. Generating $400,000 a year in cash on $400,000 or $4 million in revenue, right? So my ex-wife said to the owner, "Hey, look, I think I'm going to go do my own thing because you told me I was going to be an owner one day, and it hasn't really materialized. So I'm going to go off and do something else." And she happened to have been an attorney prior to running a hair salon, so kind of had this odd set of skills, and so the business owner was like, "Well, no, I really don't want to come back and operate the business. You've been running it just fine. Let's work on a deal." And so we sat down and talked. The owner was, as many owners are, had a fantastic idea of what the business was worth. And it was probably three or four times more than what it really was worth from a purely financial standpoint. I had been working in the M&A world a little bit, so I had a little bit of inside baseball knowledge on what should be the price. And so we were literally, $4 million versus $1 million. So we had a massive gap, right? That's almost insurmountable.
That's huge,
yeah. And so the conversation really came down to, I think it's worth this. I think it's worth that. And my questions kept, and I was working with a very unsophisticated seller, right? Somebody who literally had been a nail technician, somebody who did nails, who turned into a business owner of a very substantial business. So kudos to her to growing it to the place that she had grown it to, but she really didn't understand the financial. She didn't have the acumen to really understand valuation or anything like that. So I had to really kind of, and frankly, she's sitting across the table from an M&A guy and an attorney, and we had to really kind of dial back that conversation in a way that wasn't intimidating and it wasn't too overreaching, and it didn't feel like we were trying to screw her. So it really came down to, I kept asking the question of, okay, how do you get to that value? How do you get to that value? And she really didn't have any way to describe how she got to the value other than a gut feel for what it was worth. And I suggested that we bring somebody in from the outside who had done deals before, could maybe help us navigate. Now, this is my first deal to actually acquire, my ex-wife's first deal to actually acquire, and her first deal to sell, right? So none of the three of us had been involved in a deal before. I just knew that, the numbers didn't jive. So we actually brought in, at her suggestion, somebody in the salon industry to kind of guide us. And we kind of both made our cases and threw numbers at the guy. And the guy sat down and as I suspected, at every turn, he was like, "No, these guys are right. No, these guys are right. No, these guys are right." And the good news was it was her mediator, it wasn't ours. So that was kind of an interesting play. And so so we ended up landing on a number. I think it was about $1.5 million. But now we've come to an agreement on $1.5 million as a price, and what's the answer, right? It's like dog catches car. So oh shit, what do I do now? And so we had to come up with $1.5 million, and I can tell you we didn't have that. As a matter of fact, we didn't have whole lot of savings. We were in a spot where we really didn't have much to hang our hats on. What we did have was business background and business acumen, and we landed with a banker who was willing to roll the dice a little bit with us. So he came to the table, said, "Hey, look, I'm willing to take a bet on you guys, but here's what I need. The acquisition is $1.5 million. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in, we'll loan you $1 million if you can somehow or another establish some equity in some form of up to 10% of the deal, so $150,000. Again, 150 grand to us it might as well have been 150 million.
I was about to say, probably, I know for most of our listeners, it's going to be like, well, I'm out.
Right. Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interestingly, back, this was in the mid 2000s. This is before the big short. So it was literally spring of 2008. The world collapsed in fall of 2008. So at that point, they allowed you to use seller notes, or the fact that the seller took back some of the debt. So if you think about the way that works, $1.5 million, we're going to borrow $1 million. The seller's going to loan us $500,000. Okay. The way they loan that is you basically just take from operating cash. You make loan payments to them out of operating cash. So effectively, they're holding a promissory note, and you're making payments on that promissory note, but it's basically funded by the seller as opposed to by a bank or an outside investor or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Now, what's the incentive for the seller to issue this loan, essentially?
Well, two things. One is that they might get, in our case, I think we were paying 6% on the note, so they get a little bit of return on it, which compared to other options, maybe it doesn't suck. And then the other option, or the other reason, is that you basically, as a buyer, like, hey, I don't have an alternative. So it's either you loan me the money or I don't do the deal. At some point, if you're already down the rabbit hole, it's really hard for the seller to walk away from that, just because they know they've got a real buyer in hand. They've already they've already spent the money. Their head is already down the path of they've done the deal.
Yeah, they're already
Right? She walks
$1.5
away with $1
million
million
rich.
bucks.
Right.
Oh, go ahead. What was that?
No, I was going to say they're already $1.5 million rich.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they've already contemplated what they're doing with that, and the first vacation they're taking, and the first car they're buying, or whatever it is. Right. So and it wasn't, those things weren't done in a way to be manipulative at all. It was just that, hey, we didn't really have a choice. The bank was going to loan us $1 million. If you wanted more than that, then here's how it's going to have to work. And at that point, like I said, they were allowing a full 10% to be in the form of a seller note. Since then, they've changed that. Now you can usually only put 5% of a seller of the purchase price in the form of a seller note, and the other 5% you need to actually have cash in hand. And I'll talk about that with my other deal, the machine shop deal, in a second.
Jeff, just to ask you real quick, for our listeners who are not familiar with what a seller's note is, can you explain that a little bit more, and then just kind of also explain how that payment was being made? Was it being made directly to the seller, or was it being all transacted through the bank in one payment?
Yeah, right. Great question. So a seller note is literally, instead of me as a seller, instead I get, I sell the business for $1.5 million. I'm getting $1 million in hand on closing day. And the other thing I have in my other hand is a $500,000 promissory note that says Jeff's going to pay me $500,000 over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever that timeline is. And it literally is a promissory note that says, I owe $500,000. I owe it, in monthly payments, quarterly payments, whatever we agree on. Here's the interest rate. Here are the payment amounts. And I'm literally making that payment either through wire or through cutting a check every month or quarter to that seller. And then when that note is extinguished, when it's completely paid off, the notes no longer exist. Now, some sellers are willing to perfect that note through a lien, like you would a normal bank would, but they're always going to be subordinated to the primary lender, right? So even as a seller who's holding paper, they're going to be subordinated to the bank who had the $1 million loan out, and that sort of thing. So you have your kind of, for me as a buyer, I had my structure. I knew I had $1 million that had to go to the bank, and if I didn't, they were going to take my house. They had a personal guarantee. They had all the things that they did to perfect it. They had liens on all the property, on the physical property of the business, and they were going to come after me for that $1 million one way or another. Okay. And then as soon as I paid them every month, then I had money. Hopefully, I had money left over to pay her, the seller, and then as those payments were made, okay, done. I got another 30 days before I have to make that payment again.
So I just want to
yep.
really clarify for the audience that you bought this business without pulling any money out of your pocket.
Correct. Yeah, that was a zero out of pocket story. And actually, I'll be very honest with you, Alex. That's every company I bought without any money out of my pocket, which is a little, I don't know. I think it's good.
That's phenomenal. I think most people don't even know that that's an option. They think you have to be bringing cash to the table. You literally did it with an IOU.
Correct. And so that was, in the hair salon deal, that's exactly how it was. It was the bank took a bet on me. Alex, you and I have talked about SBA loans before.
Mm-hmm.
This was an SBA loan, what that means is that the SBA, the bank made the loan to me. The SBA has to approve the loan, but what they're doing is they're guaranteeing 75% of that loan. So the bank gets some of its risk laid off to the SBA. The SBA's objective is to have more people be business owners. That's their perfect world, is we find more people out there who want to buy a business or who want to start a business or whatever. And so you can get a loan from the SBA, but that loan has to come through a bank, an SBA lender. So that's what happened. The bank made the loan. The SBA agreed to the loan. They offered a 75% guarantee on the total amount. So they were on the hook. If I didn't pay a dime from day one, and I didn't have any money or any assets that they could actually go after, then the SBA was on the hook for $750,000. Now, the real story behind an SBA guarantee is a little more nuanced. So what happens is that if I didn't pay and they came after me and took all my assets and liquidated them, and say they were able to satisfy $600,000 of that loan, there's $400,000 left. The SBA then would pay $300,000 to the bank to cover their losses. They really don't guarantee the entirety of the $750,000. They guarantee the losses to the bank. So that's a little wonky and nerdy on SBA loans, but that's how those work. And it's a great vehicle for business acquisition. You guys probably know it on the real estate side. It can be a tool for real estate. It's a great tool for disadvantaged veteran. There are options out there through the SBA that are useful with regard to ways to acquire businesses or get capital for business ventures.
Cool.
And are there any particular requirements for the SBA loan, just for our listeners who are not familiar with it?
That's a good topic as well. So the requirement that we found out after the fact, and pardon the dog barking out here, but the requirement that we found out after the fact was that the transaction has to be 100% ownership of the business. The seller cannot be involved in the business after the sale. So we had originally planned to be a 81% owner, because then if we got an SBA loan, so the way the SBA works is that any owner more than 20% has to personally guarantee the note. So in that case, the seller was like, well, I don't want to personally guarantee anything, so I would take 19%. You guys take 81%. And then the bank came back and said, you can't do that because it has to be the seller has to be completely out of the deal. And so that is one factor. The other factors are really surrounding kind of the covenants that go with that debt. They're very nerdy and wonky. They're things that you have to do and documents you have to provide to them and application packets and all that kind of jazz. But it's the biggest things are first of all, it has to be a full transaction of the entire business. Anybody who comes into the deal if they're more than 20% owner, has to be personally guaranteed. And those are the two big chunks of that for the SBA loans.
Good stuff.
There's a lot to it. And I've had a few of those conversations with those SBA lenders. I mean, they've asked me for like something as simple as my resume, just to make sure that I have the basic skills to run a business, right? They've asked about your education and stuff like that. They'll ask, I guess your financial statement, like your own personal finances. They want to get an idea of your assets and your net worth and some of that stuff so that they can come after you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all fair game. What they're going to want is, and now more than ever because of what's happened. Certainly what happened in 2008 and whatnot. They definitely want their borrowers to have skin in the game. That said, there's ways around that, as I've proven. There's definitely it's a full scrutiny of your lending profile. I've got a great banker. He's been a partner of mine. One of the things I'll tell people from a business standpoint, and whether I would say it's whether you're an acquisition person or a real estate person or whatever, is to find a banker that you really can build a relationship with. Because the fact is, and I don't know how many accountants or attorneys listen to your podcast, but accountants and attorneys you're on the clock with. And that's just the relationship you have. And so they may give you advice, but they're going to charge you for it. A banker wants to get a deal done. So a banker's basically going to give you free advice, free per se, because they want to push towards getting a deal done. And they're going to help you, and they're going to challenge you and ask the right questions. And it's all about, building a relationship over years to have that resource. And I'll tell you, my banker was a person over the last 15 years that every time I had an opportunity or something crazy happened in my life, I went to him and said, hey, let's talk through this. And he's able to say, well, ABC, here's how, here's what I think. There are many times that he just shook his head at me and said, Jeff, that's a really dumb idea. And there were, obviously a couple of times where he said, yeah, let's rock and roll. Let's go. So.
Now, are you using like a normal commercial bank, like a PNC, Bank of America, or like a boutique specialty bank?
I have a very solid opinion on that too. So my belief is that if you can look up in the Business Journal or some, Cranes or whoever's your local business, rag, if you can look up top SBA lenders in your marketplace, start at the top and ignore all the ones you've heard of before. Because I'm sorry, PNC, great company, US Bank, great company, B of A, they're all great companies, but they don't give a shit about you. And you're just loan number 74374. You're not, Alex Escobar, you're not Aziz Yusuf. So, that's my experience. And I believe that had I not found a guy who was literally one of the founders of at the time a single location bank in our neighborhood, that I probably wouldn't be talking about acquisition entrepreneurship right now, because he made the deal, he made it happen, he helped me navigate it, he's helped me navigate everything since then, and as a matter of fact, he's partnering with me on a project that I'll tell you guys about it when we get to the end of this. So.
Yeah, we find that a lot with a lot of the people that we speak to, whether it's real estate or other projects or whatnot. They always tend to find those deals with those smaller banking institutions. instead of the big boys. A lot of times they're a lot more flexible and they're willing to build that personal relationship.
Well, and on top of it, if something starts to go sideways, I want somebody who's going to partner with me, not someone who's going to pull the SOPs off the shelf and start going through, well, right now we're supposed to go and check your equity in your home. Like, oh shit. I want somebody who's going to say, okay, what's going on? Send me your P&Ls. Let's sit down and talk about this. What's the problem? Let's talk through, business stuff and really diagnose the issues. And is this catastrophic, or is this temporary, or or is this just you're being stupid, or what? But they can they can work with you and they can be your partner as opposed to be your adversary in that situation.
Yeah. It's almost like having a second spouse.
It really is. I mean, I'll tell you that Jerry has been the guy that my go-to guy for literally for 15 years, and anybody who doesn't try to develop a relationship with a banker does it to their own peril, because those guys are super smart and connected, and just the right ones are creative and have seen more deals than you have. So that's the other part, is that they've seen a bunch of them.
So I think that's a really valuable thing. So I mean, you mentioned relationship building as just like a big takeaway there. Thank you so much for listening to the show. It's a big step to realize that there's a whole world of opportunity out there for you. And then you've already started to dive into your education, which is required to be able to navigate the world beyond the stock market. But the next step is to take action. So if you want a chance to invest with me and my team, sign up for our investor club at legatoinvest.com/invest. We'll schedule a call with you, get to know you, your background, and your investment objectives. And if there's a good fit, we'll start to present you with live opportunities to invest in multifamily apartment deals. So again, legatoinvest.com/invest. Thanks again. Now, there's a few other questions I have, the businesses that you've had, like the nail salon and stuff like that. One thing I'm really interested in is kind of this, I guess, continuum of how passive a business can be.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some conversations recently with people who are interested in buying like a laundromat, thinking it's going to be a more passive income. You just kind of go and collect the coins or whatever. I had another conversation with a past client who bought a laundromat and is selling it because he was spending 30 hours a week on it.
Right. Right.
But I'm curious, in your experience, and not only your own deals, but in other deals that maybe you've seen, how passive can a business be?
Well, I mean, they can be complete absentee. I personally wouldn't recommend that, only because if it's your money on the line, it's your ass on the line. I'm not convinced that I want to be completely leaving that to chance. When we bought the hair salon, we had the advantage of my ex-wife having worked there for 5-6 years and knew the business inside and out, and the team knew her, and there was a rapport and all that kind of stuff. When we bought the manufacturing deal that was part of our supply chain in the salon world, was a very, very small business, and had sort of an absentee owner, so that sort of operated on its own already. So there wasn't really a need for much. Although with a little bit of energy, there was an opportunity to grow and be more important and those kind of things. And in the machine shop business, honestly, we had a guy who was the main operator of the business, who was 50 years old, and he had no plans to leave anytime in the next 10 years and 15 years. And the seller of the business hadn't been in the doors, meaningfully for 15 years. So I do believe that the optimal situation is to find a business that has very competent operators today, that you talk to a seller or a business owner who isn't part of the critical path of getting things done every day, right? Like somebody who's, maybe they're strategic, maybe they're, But if they're the sales guy, or if they're the estimator, or if they're the, that can be dodgy, because at the end of the day, you really don't know, in most cases, unless you've worked in the business, you don't know the business. Somebody has to know the business and how to operate it. And that person has to be an ally too, because of that. And my view is, when we bought the machine shop business, for instance, the operator was a guy that we insisted on as a contingency in our agreement, that he had to be under an employment agreement, or else we weren't going to buy the company. So we actually made that a stipulation in our agreement. So I truly believe that you can buy a company, you can spend 6 to 12 months making sure it's stable, making sure it's sustainable for the future, and putting an operating system, and implementing an operating system that allows it to kind of run, maybe not on its own, but pretty close, right? Everybody's rowing in the same direction. They have a meeting rhythm, some kind of battle rhythm that they're used to. They know what winning looks like. They can see on the wall, whether it's a scoreboard on the wall or on a computer, or whatever it is. They see some answers as to are we winning this week or this month, or not. And they understand the quarterly, annual, 3-year vision of where this business is going. And I think as the CEO, your job is really to be, you want to be the visionary. You want to be the person who casts vision every day and helps people understand that they're part of a bigger, something bigger than themselves. And you also want to, be the mood setter. So you want to keep the tempo up, or the energy up. And, if you're walking through a shop and your head's down, or you look worried or pissed or anything like that, that stuff gets picked up on like that. Right. I believe that, all I could do in most cases was screw things up. So I just wanted to stay out of the way in most cases. So.
Now, Jeff, I just want to ask, I know that you come from an M&E background, or sorry, not mergers and acquisitions, M&A.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep.
And that being the case, you've got an eye for business. You know how to value a business. You also know what to look for in terms of whether someone can operate your business for you. Now, for a normal, everyday, average person, Joe Schmo, who does not have that background at all, how do they go about getting those skills? What should they be looking for, whether it comes to evaluating the value of the business, and also making sure that the people that they're bringing on board or keeping on board are going to keep the business running smoothly? Like, how do they get those skill sets? What type of resources should be using, and what should they be looking for? If you can walk us through some of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what I found was, and I was fortunate in that I come from a military background, and I believe that young officers, young non-commissioned officers in the military are charged with leading humans, right? That's their job. And so I felt like if I do nothing else well, what I could do well is motivate a team. And so, give them a purpose to rally behind. I was fortunate that I had a lot of leadership opportunities at a young age. And so I was kind of bred that way through a military, my West Point experience, and then in the Army. I would argue that for kind of the normal person who's not going through some crazy college experience like that they're going to want to from a business valuation standpoint, there are resources on the internet like bizbuysell.com and some other websites that are, and brokers that are going to give you an idea of what valuations look like given certain circumstances, certain industries. So if you look at the automotive parts industry, automotive parts distribution industry, you'll see that typical revenues for those companies are 1.4 million. I'm just making these up, so don't fact check me on this. But typical revenues are 1.4 million, and typical profit margins are 15%. So that's $210,000, and typical multiples are 3 times. So typical businesses sell for $630,000. Okay, that's typical, and then you can compare that to something. Precision machining might be 5 times multiple because tougher, higher barriers to entry and those kind of things that cause you to have higher multiples. They may be higher revenue numbers and with lower margins or something like that. So you're going to find things on BizBuySell is a great website for that. They give you a lot of general insights into the industries, from an industry basis. So that's a pretty useful way to understand it. I also kind of just plug into deals, and brokers will have deals listed on their website, or you can get on their newsletter mailing list and that sort of thing, and just see deals. And the more deals you look at, the more you get an understanding of what they're looking for, why someone's exiting, what the business does, what their economic machine is. I'm very, as you guys can tell, owning a hair salon and a manufacturing company and a smoothie shop and what, I'm business agnostic, right? Like I don't care what industry.
I was about to say, like you're jumping all over the place to all these different venues that I'm sure you don't have. I mean, you had a little bit of background through your ex-wife with the hair salon, but then to go to machine shop, the smoothies, and all this other stuff.
Yeah. So those are that having like I said, I'm industry agnostic. There are industries that I don't want to get into, but the idea of what I want to learn is what's their economic engine. And then how do they generate cash? Okay. And once I understand that, then I can understand, okay, why are multiples higher or lower in this industry? What makes sense? What's the right level, and that sort of thing. And I can kind of see a good deal versus a not so good deal. So that's on the deal side, that's the way to educate yourself and, really just to see more deals. As far as finding talent, that's as you look under the hood, you're going to find that somebody's either capable or not, and the question is going to come down to maybe a little bit of gut, certainly some pulling back the covers a little bit.
Well, one last question I want to point out, because we're running close to our not that there's a time limit, but we're getting a little long. So this has been super valuable. One last thing I think we might have glanced over a little bit is just the benefits of buying a business versus starting a business.
Yeah, right.
Because I think that's kind of like a really fundamental question, right? Like with those laundry people, that's what I was kind of weighing, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think.
And I feel very strongly about this. I have a lot of strong opinions. They're worth every penny you're paying for it, Alex. But I've started up businesses and I failed miserably at them. And what I will say is starting a business is a heavy lift. You guys well know that. It's really getting, it's really grinding it out. It's trying to get the word out. It's all those things that are very difficult, and some things you're really good at, and some things you suck at. And at the beginning, you have to do them all. You're chief cook and bottle washer, right? You're doing all of it, and you may not want to be washing bottles, but you got to. So that's the challenge of business, startup. The business acquisition side, to me, is you've got a functioning business. You wouldn't buy it unless it was a functioning business that was creating cash. And all you're really doing is taking out, hopefully, a part that can be replaced and putting in a new leader, and then trying not to screw things up. So there's a whole methodology, in my eyes, for making that transition and making it in a way that doesn't upset the apple cart. So from the overall list standpoint, I think that business acquisition is the path that, I won't say I'll never start up a business, because I'm doing it right now, but in my eyes, I wouldn't go out and buy. I would go out and buy a company long before I would start something in that space. I think that to me, it's interesting. I meet a lot of people who want to, they see the idea of being an entrepreneur and they want to be an entrepreneur. I also believe that a lot of people want to create generational wealth. I don't think that you do that working for someone else. I think that in the scenario where you're working for somebody else, you grow gradually. You can be super competent, high performer. You can be a high wage earner, but you've grown into that wage, and you may not have meant to. You may have said, I can live within my means, and I can, I don't need a big swanky house. I don't need a big swanky car and this and that, but I have kids and now like this and school and this, all that stuff. And all of a sudden you're getting paid, $250,000 a year, and you're spending $250,000 a year. Okay. And I'm not, but what the worry about that is that, I can scrape off 10% and put it in my 401k, and I can hope that grows at 6% a year. And if I do the math and I go back and look at the chart, I'll have, $1 million after 30 years. That's awesome. I think you can create $1 million a hell of a lot faster by acquiring $1 million business with $900,000 of debt, paying down that $900,000 of debt through the cash flows of the business over the course of 7, 8, 9 years. Now you got $1 million asset, and it took me 7 or 8 years and I got paid to do it. Right, I was taking a salary while I was doing it.
Oh, wow.
So
and not to mention the growth that you've created, assuming you create and grow a business too.
And that's what I was saying. Like that's steady state. That's let's say it's worth $1 million today, and it's going to be worth $1 million 10 years from now. It's just going to be your money, and you did it with other people's money. And to me, it's the genius of how do I create that generational wealth. I think the way you create generational wealth, if you look at the numbers, 90% of the ultra wealthy, those people who have $10 million in assets or more, are business owners. Now, even if you take out the doctors and lawyers who have their own practice and that kind of bullshit, still 70% of them are business owners. Okay, so I mean, that's where the generational wealth comes from. Very few of those people are working for McKinsey making 1.5 or $3 million a year, or they're football coach or whatever crazy things you can do. I mean, there are skills that you can have out there. You be LeBron James and be worth $100 million, but there aren't many of those.
Yeah,
I'm only 6'3", so
only 6'3".
and I think the key phrase that you also said is doing all of that, but doing it with other people's money and not your own. I think that's key. That's what keeps a lot of people from pursuing these things, because they think that they've got to do this all out of pocket. And then the other thing is they don't even know how to go about finding these deals. So those are two clutch things. Can you kind of briefly mention like some of the other options that for kind of financing these businesses? I know you mentioned also how you find these deals.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm not a great guy to talk to about finding deals because I sort of swing a stick and they come to me. So I've been very fortunate in that respect. But some people would argue that you go through the broker network and talk to business brokers, and there's tons of them out there. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. What I would say is you might want to get higher up on the food chain, meaning that by the time a broker has a deal, it's probably been looked at by a lot of people and passed on by a lot of people. So my thought is that if there's a way over the course of your career to build relationships with accountants, attorneys, bankers, people who know business owners and who deal with business owners on a regular basis, those are the people that if you put a bug in their ear that, hey, I'm looking, one of those guys is going to go, you know what? Alex told me that he was looking for a company. I should talk to Alex about this. That so-and-so just told me that they were, I know this guy's 70 years old and he's looking to make a transition and et cetera, et cetera. So I think to me, that seems like a reasonable way to go about business acquisition and finding deals. I just think that, and I think sometimes when you put it out there, my LinkedIn right now says that I'm looking for deals. When you put it out there, people know that you're in the market. And I've had a bunch of deals come to me because I put it on my LinkedIn. Okay. Haven't bought any of them, but I've had people ask me. So,
That's cool. For the broker networks, are you using services like, I know we've used LoopNet, for example,
right.
as one of ours. Is that what you're mentioning, or is it something different?
So the broker network on the business broker side, there are similar. It's very similar to the real estate side. There are specific brokers. If you Google business broker, you'll find a billion of them. There's also aggregators. There are also aggregators that's similar to LoopNet, right? So you'll have, LoopNet's going to list, or MLS will list all the properties. Think of a business broker, like we've got one here called St. Louis Business Broker. Very creative name. They have, they're the Coldwell Banker or whatever, so they would fall into those big aggregators, but they have their own listings that have been proprietary to them. Someone's come to them and said, hey, I want to sell my company. So
it's almost like a real estate agent of businesses.
Correct. And sadly, you guys know the deal on the real estate side that, some brokers are better than others. So some guys are knuckleheads and don't know anything, and some people are really savvy and talented. And so, that's the challenge, of course, with the business broker side is very similar.
Well, Jeff, I want to give you a chance to tell the audience a little bit about the project you're working on and just kind of how they can find you to connect and learn more.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. So I've just launched and I said I wasn't going to start up any businesses, but here we go. So I just launched a company called Thayer Gate Project, THAYER Gate Project. And the Thayer Gate is actually the front gate to West Point. And so my imaging with that is that I really wish that somebody would have met me at the front gate of West Point and led me through my plebe summer, because that was kind of a crazy 6.5 weeks, and then led me through my plebe year to help guide me, So what I feel like is that there are high performing, high wage earning, folks out there, professional folks out there that are kicking ass in the real world, working for other people, that really want to build generational wealth. And I believe that the way you build generational wealth is through business ownership. And my job, and what I've been put on this earth to do, is to create $1 billion of generational wealth in the next 25 years. And the way I'm going to do that is through helping people who are in that spot, who want to make that transition, but I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have that great idea or whatever. And introduce the idea of business acquisition to them. And I will meet them where they are, whether they have a deal in hand already or they want to go search for a company. And I will walk them through the process of evaluating that deal, getting the deal under a letter of intent, which the purpose behind that is to get exclusivity on buying the business, working through the due diligence and the funding process. I talked about Jerry. Jerry's my partner in this project, and Jerry will help package a loan for the SBA. He knows all the ins and outs of working with the SBA and can get a loan package set up so that you look like a superstar in front of the SBA. And we have a funding guarantee that says if we can't find you a bank to do the loan, then you don't pay us anything. So he can make introductions. He has a bank network around the country that he can introduce clients to, and then we get that deal to closing. Once that deal closes, the client becomes my one-on-one client, and I work with them. I coach them through the first 12 to 18 months of their ownership of that business. At that point, we're partners. I'm a 15% partner. They're an 85% partner. And the goal is to do those things we talked about: the operating system, put together a business plan, get a meeting rhythm, battle rhythm put in place, put scoreboards up and get things going that way. And I will help implement those systems. And then after 12 months or 18 months, I'll let go of the back of the bike. And there'll be a structured payout to have me walk away. And that person is now 100% owner of a small business, and they're building generational wealth for themselves.
It's amazing.
So thanks. Yeah. So I'm really excited about it. I think there's opportunity. I think there are lots of people who fall into that category. I don't need to help, 6,000 of them. I can help 6, right? I feel like each one of those is a step towards my $1 billion goal, and that I truly believe I'll achieve. And I think that in that process, you're really bringing to bear all the things that are the quote American dream, right? I mean, this is business ownership, and it's doing it in a sort of safer environment. One thing I didn't mention earlier that I think is interesting is that startups. You asked me earlier why buy a business instead of a startup. Startups tend to fail pretty regularly, right? So like 40% of startups aren't going to be around in 3 years, I think is the stat. The failure rate of SBA loans, which are mostly used for funding SBA 7A loans, which are mostly used for funding acquisitions, the failure rate's about 2.5%. So I like my odds with an SBA loan. I've had a bank and I've had the SBA review my deal, and they believe in me over the odds of just starting something from scratch. That's the way I look at it. So Fairgate project, I'm really excited about it. I don't have a website just yet. It should be up and ready sometime in the month of March. But I'm super excited about it, and I think people can reach me. I'm sure you're going to connect my email and my phone number to the post, but my phone number is 314-221-0305. My email is jeffrey.n as in November.evenson or Evanson, whichever one you want to call me, at gmail.com.
Awesome. Jeff, no, that's huge. I mean, I feel I'll also put a link to your LinkedIn. We'll put all that stuff in there, but yeah, I think it's just such a really compelling value proposition to someone like me, to someone like Aziz. A lot of people I think in our audience are going to be really excited about something like that because exactly like you said, I mean, we're interested in building wealth. We're interested in fast tracking that, not waiting until the end to kind of have something
to
pass on. We want something that, the thing I always like to say is that investment should improve our lives, not delay it, right?
Sure.
And so something like this seems it's completely in line. And full disclosure, right? You and I are talking about doing a deal together through your Thayergate program. And so, I've already found your help to be incredibly helpful, but it's just, instead of feeling my way through the dark, I got someone who's got a flashlight, who's been there before, and it's exciting. It lends a lot more confidence to me to actually take that next step instead of saying, I'm afraid to take that next step.
Cool.
And so thank you for your friendship. Thank you for being on the show. And
right on.
Thank you for the information. This was very, very informative. We really, really appreciate it.
I'm glad it was useful. It excites me. I get excited about it every time I talk about it. So great stuff. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And please really come back when the Thayergate is up and running, and as you get more deals on the board.
Yeah, I'll tell more stories about those. That'd be great. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Awesome.